All right.
Hello and welcome to my channel. Vice Rhino here. Today I've got another video from the Dirty Christian where he asks an atheist a question. So let's see what he has to say.
Alright.
All right. Maybe there's like the original video. Oh, here it is. It's more useful. I want to answer these questions without somebody else fucking answering the questions.
Alright, guys. So, I'll be the first person to admit that I don't know a lot about a ton of stuff. And so I'm going to say this straight up that I don't know a lot about atheism. But I have some questions.
What is there to know about atheism? Literally, there's pretty much absolutely nothing to know about. It's not a religion. It's not a cult. It's a simple lack of belief in an all-powerful being, basically. That's it. That's all you need to know. Anything else is just associated with atheism, or a correlation with atheism. With atheism itself, that's it. That's all you need to know. It's just a lack of belief in a god. Problem solved. Now you know.
For atheists that I'm trying to understand myself. It appears to me that most atheists are Western influenced, typically white, and typically male.
Irrelevant.
Now there are some female atheists out there. They typically subscribe to very militant feminism. So my question is, and this is just from stuff that I've watched, because again, I don't have an interest in trying to disprove atheism or anything like that. I literally just I don't under.
Disproving a lack of belief in something is pretty silly. I mean, by definition, if you have to believe something, that means that there isn't fucking evidence for it. So a lack of a belief in something is always a sound position, because you don't have evidence. If you did, you wouldn't have to believe it. You could use the evidence to come to that conclusion logically. And therefore, the lack of a belief in something is always the valid place. Because you don't have to believe in scientific things, and you shouldn't believe in non-scientific things or things that don't have evidence.
Understand why. Why is it that most atheists debate and try to tear down Christianity? I don't see a lot of atheists.
Well, that's mostly because those people were raised in it, either through their own indoctrination that they have since sort of surpassed and transcended, or just they live around it a lot and they're more subjected to it. So therefore, it's something that's constantly, would give them the motivation to sort of, attack those ideas, because they're constantly having to deal with them. Whereas other religions are less, they're less prevalent, where they're from, and therefore it's not as much of a concern. But yes, those people do still think those other religions are just as bullshit, or at least most of them. Some of the more Eastern style ones aren't as bad. They're not as bad. They're more interesting, but they're still bullshit.
Debating Buddhists or Muslims or Jews. It's mostly Christians that they debate against. And why, if you don't believe that God exists, why do you have to spend so much time convincing others of the same thing?
If you don't believe somebody exists, it's not about convincing other people for its own sake. It's about showing people that the conclusions they've come to are erroneous, and as a result of these conclusions, that the society has suffered throughout history, and it still does. And there's all these aspects, like tax exemption and stuff, where, these religious, basically fanatics, just get all these rewards and advantages and all these systems of protection for their horse shit, and people have a problem with that, obviously, and that makes perfect sense. If somebody has like special exemption to the rules just because of horseshit beliefs, of course it's gonna rile people up and piss them off, and it should.
Like, unless you want to know why I love Jesus and why I think that Jesus is real, I'm not going to spend my time.
We try to debunk things because, first of all, it's part of like our instilled sense of self, that we have this propensity or desire to, look at things objectively and try to explain them, and then put those ideas out there in the limelight and under scrutiny where they can be engaged with intellectually. It's not so much about proving ourselves right as it is about finding things that make sense in like-minded people and even not like-minded people, and then getting into arguments with them so that you can show them how erroneous their foundation really is, and you can find out if there's any parts of yours that aren't so sound. People don't go out of their way to engage with people because it's a waste of time. They do it to intellectually grow as people and hopefully help other people grow too, and not necessarily the people they're debating with, but the people watching the debate who maybe are sort of in the middle and divided and they don't know what to believe. They'll be swayed by the argument, so they're trying to make the world a better place by building a foundation of logic underneath their ground, like underneath their feet. Like they're trying to make the world more intellectual, and they want to be heard because of programming and vanity. And it's not just that they want their ideas there; they want people to hear that it's them saying it. Maybe that's small and petty, but people are small and petty.
Convincing you of that. And again, that's why I don't really know a lot about atheism, because I don't
Not much
have
to know.
enough time to focus on
Wouldn't take more than 10
Jesus
seconds.
Christ, to focus on your non-belief in a God.
Exactly, you just explained it.
Seems counterproductive for me. It seems more like it should be live and let live. If your pursuit is intelligence...
Live and let live only applies to things that are not doing any harm. Okay, if something is not harming anyone, you let them be. But religion takes children at a very young age and starts instilling this cultic propaganda into their little, brains that cannot actually deal with these ideas under any kind of scrutiny. They cannot challenge them properly. It's a rare thing that a kid would be able to fully challenge it. And it's not just indoctrinative cultic belief system. It's also a cult of fear. It's taking a child who's vulnerable and young and instilling creepy totalitarian notions into his brain or her, at a very young age, where they're not, they don't have an active defense against this absurd horseshit, and then they grow up no longer challenging it because authority figures that they respected and loved put it into their heads that, they're going to burn if they don't believe what they're told, So really, if it's not a live and let live because it's not doing any harm. It's we have to attack this because it's just wrong to indoctrinate children into a belief system that says you're going to burn in hell if you don't. It's also it creates a sense of entitlement. Of like, oh, because I believe this, I'm superior to you, and I get to go to a nice place. Well, I get to be glad that you don't if I don't like you. It's like how sinister and vile that is. Like people attack this horseshit not just because it's horseshit, because it's damaging to society and people, and it holds us all back. It's not a live and let live because it's fucking harmless. If it was harmless, no one would really care. I mean, except maybe assholes, but who gives a shit? People care because it's a damaging effect on society and people, and they should deal with that. That things that are dangerous and damaging should be confronted, not just left to stew and in the distance, and just like leave them to it, because that's right. No, absurd.
That's great. My pursuit is intelligence also.
No, it's not.
I very much believe in science. I very much believe in a lot
If you really believed in those things, you would understand that those things are in and of themselves. You don't need to keep applying your God to these things. To understand these things, you have to look at it for what they are in and of themselves. You cannot continuously apply, oh, but God did it. Or you cannot really factor your beliefs into something that's not requiring belief. If you're really interested in learning and knowledge, you have to look at it logically and independently of other things. And if you don't do that, then you're not, seeking out true knowledge. You're just looking to pad your belief structure into something else that really has no place being, because scientific theories have nothing to do with God. And you can try and cram your beliefs onto it all you want, but it's not a part of the equation. It's completely independent.
Things that you believe too, except for I believe that there is a God and you believe that there isn't. So,
Well, not necessarily. They just don't believe there is. Believing there isn't is technically, a different sort of belief. I believe that there isn't a Christian God, and even if there is, I think that he's a complete cunt. Okay, not only because, all of the bad stuff, but all of that bad stuff, is not just people he made to be bad. They're just him. You don't have a will. You don't have free will. You don't have a mind if God exists. You just have programming. You have what he made you to do. So it doesn't matter what you do because there is no you. The entire concept of a person doesn't exist if you're somebody else's design. It only reflects the designer, not the designed.
I just want to understand why, if you are so adamant about a God's non-existence, why do you...
It's not about the total lack of a God. It's just that this theological thing, this God of these qualities and aspects, and the actual tangible effect it has on our reality, that people believe this. It's not about we try to disprove God outright. We just don't want to believe these erroneous conclusions that have no foundation, that are damaging to society, and we try to challenge that because it's like a moral imperative, because it's just absolutely detrimental to the system and to the way things work, It's not about disproving it for its own sake. It's not even really about disproving it. It's about disproving aspects of it, because you don't have to disprove something outright. You just have to disprove, if this God exists, this is what that would apply to, and this is what it pertains. Or if he doesn't exist, look at all these contradictions. This God can't exist, because that doesn't really make sense. There's really no good arguments for it. Disproving something doesn't have to be, for its own sake. And people don't necessarily go out of the way to prove there is no God. They just try to prove there is no God with these particular attributes.
You spend so much time convincing other people of his non-existence as well.
Well, that wraps it up.